Imagine standing by a river you haven't seen in 5 years. The water is the same, the cliffs are the same, the trees haven't moved, but you have changed profoundly, quietly, irrevocably. And as you stand there, you begin to wonder, what did this place do to me when I wasn't looking? That is the question at the heart of one of the most extraordinary poems in the English language. Lines written a few miles above Tintern Abbey by William Wordsworth. Written in 1798, published in Lyrical Ballads, and even 200 years later, it reads like a letter written directly to your soul. Today, we are going to go through this poem line by line, and I promise you, by the end, you will look at nature, memory, and the people you love in a completely different way. So let's begin. William Wordsworth was born in 1770 in the Lake District of England, a landscape so wild and dramatic it practically wrote itself into his poetry. He was not just a poet, he was a philosopher in verse, a man who believed that the deepest truths about human existence could not be found in lecture halls or churches, but in the experience of nature itself. His life was shaped by loss. His mother died when he was 8, his father when he was 13. He was, from early on, a man who understood that life strips things away, and that what remains after the stripping is what truly matters. As a young man, Wordsworth was electrified by the French Revolution. He went to France, he fell in love. He believed humanity was on the edge of a great transformation. And then he watched the dream collapse into the terror. The guillotine, the chaos, the betrayal of ideals. He came home shattered. Who saved him? Nature and his sister Dorothy. These two forces would become the twin pillars of his greatest poetry, and both are present in full in Tintern Abbey. To understand Tintern Abbey, we must understand the world it was written against. The late 18th century was the age of the Industrial Revolution. Factories, smoke, children working in mines, cities swelling with poverty and noise, the ancient rhythms of rural life were being shattered. And intellectually, the Enlightenment had declared reason to be the supreme human faculty. Logic, science, measurement, the universe as a machine. The Romantics looked at this world and said, something essential is being lost. They were not anti-science, they were anti-reductionism. The idea that human life could be fully explained by mechanics and markets. Romantics as a movement was a recovery of what the Enlightenment had sidelined. That is, emotion as a form of knowing, imagination as a pathway to truth, nature as a living spiritual presence, not a resource to be exploited. The individual self, its growth, its suffering, its transcendence. The Romantics, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Keats, Shelley, Blake, they were not nostalgic escapists. They were radicals. They believed that to restore feeling and wonder to human life was a moral and political act. Wordsworth in particular believed that ordinary people, shepherds, farmers, children, had access to a kind of wisdom that the educated classes had lost. This is why he wrote in plain language, not to be simple, but to be honest. Now let's talk about lyrical ballads. Tintern Abbey was not published alone. It appeared at the end of Lyrical Ballads, a small revolutionary collection co-written with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, published in 1798. 2 years later, in the 1800 edition, Wordsworth added a preface that became the manifesto of English Romanticism. You cannot fully understand Tintern Abbey without it. Let me give you the 3 central ideas of the preface. First, poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. But here is the crucial second part of that sentence, which people often forget. It proceeds from emotion recollected in tranquility. Not the raw moment, the memory of the moment, processed through reflection. This is exactly what Tintern Abbey is. A poet returning to a place and discovering that the memory of it has been secretly living inside him for 5 years. Second, the language of poetry should be the language of ordinary men. Wordsworth was rebelling against the ornate, artificial diction of 18th century verse. He wanted poetry to speak the way people actually feel, directly, without performance. And third, the poet is a man speaking to men, but with heightened sensibility. The poet is not above the reader. The poet is with the reader, walking the same earth, feeling the same losses, but perhaps more awake to what those feelings mean. Keep these ideas in your mind as we read the poem, because Tintern Abbey is not just a poem. It is the preface made flesh. So now let's begin with the poem, and I'll read you lines 1 to 22, and then we will dissect them. 5 years have passed, 5 summers, with the length of 5 long winters. And again I hear these waters rolling from their mountain springs with a soft inland murmur. Once again do I behold these steep and lofty cliffs, that on a wild secluded scene impress thoughts of more deep seclusion, and connect the landscape with the quiet of the sky. The day is come when I again repose here under this dark sycamore, and view these plots of cottage ground, these orchard tufts, which at the season with their unripe fruits are clad in one green hue, and lose themselves mid groves and copses. Once again I see these hedgerows, hardly hedgerows, little lines of sportive wood run wild, these pastoral farms green to the very door, and wreaths of smoke sent up in silence from among the trees. With some uncertain notice, as might seem of vagrant dwellers in the houseless woods, or of some hermit's cave, where by his fire the hermit sits alone. Okay, so 5 years have passed, 5 summers with the length of 5 long winters, and again I hear these waters. Notice how the poem opens not with a grand statement, but with counting. 5 years, 5 summers, 5 winters. Why does Wordsworth count like this? Because time is the real subject of this poem. Not just nature, time and what it does to us. The repetition, 5 years, 5 summers, 5 long winters, is not accidental. He's pressing on the bruise of absence. He's measuring the distance between who he was and who he is now. Again, I hear these waters rolling from their mountain springs with a sweet inland murmur. Sounds, before sight. He hears the river before he sees it. This is deeply significant. In moments of genuine return to a place, to a memory, to a person, we are often arrested by something sensory before we can think. The body remembers before the mind does. Once again do I behold these steep and lofty cliffs, which on a wild secluded scene impress thoughts of more deep seclusion. The cliffs don't just exist, they impress thoughts. Nature is not passive here, nature acts on the mind. The landscape is an agent. The day is come when I again repose here under this dark sycamore. The word repose is important. He's not just resting, he's reclining into this place as if the landscape itself is holding him. There is something almost maternal about it. Wreaths of smoke sent up in silence from among the trees, with some uncertain notice, as might seem, of vagrant dwellers in the houseless woods, or of some hermit's cave where by his fire the hermit sits alone. This is one of the most quietly haunting images in all of romantic poetry. The smoke rising from invisible fires, the uncertain notice, meaning we cannot be sure who is there or whether anyone is there at all. It could be vagrants, it could be a hermit. But notice, the hermit sits alone, and so does Wordsworth in a sense at the beginning of this poem. He has come here alone, except that Dorothy is with him. We will return to her. The philosophical depth here, the world always contains what we cannot fully see. There are always lives being lived just beyond our perception. Tintern Abbey begins with this humbling awareness. Now let's move on and let me read you lines 22 to 49. These beauteous forms through a long absence have not been to me as is a landscape to a blind man's eye, but oft in lonely rooms and with the din of towns and cities I have owed to them, in hours of weariness, sensation sweet, felt in the blood and felt along the heart, and passing even into my purer mind with tranquil restoration. Feelings too of unremembered pleasure, such perhaps as have no slight or trivial influence on that best portion of a good man's life, his little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and of love. Nor less, I trust, to them I may have owed another gift of aspect more sublime, that blessed mood in which the burden of the mystery, in which the heaven and the weary weight of all this unintelligible world is lightened, that serene and blessed mood in which the affections gently lead us on, until the breath of this corporeal frame, and even the motion of a human blood almost suspended, we are laid asleep in body and become a living soul. While with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. Beautiful, isn't it? Though absent long, these forms of beauty have not been to me as is a landscape to a blind man's eye. This is the pivot. While he was away in lonely rooms in the din of towns and cities, the memory of this place was working on him, not passively like a photograph on a shelf, actively, transformatively. In hours of weariness, sensation sweet, felt in the blood and felt along the heart, and passing even into my purer mind with tranquil restoration. Read that again. Felt in the blood and felt along the heart. This is not metaphor. Wordsworth is making a physiological claim. The memory of nature, recalled in moments of urban exhaustion, produced a bodily sensation of calm. The body is the first archive of our deepest experiences. Feelings too of unremembered pleasure, such perhaps as may have had no trivial influence on that best portion of a good man's life, his little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and of love. This is extraordinary. He is suggesting that those unnamed, unconscious acts of goodness we perform, the small kindnesses, the impulse toward love, may have been nourished by our encounters with natural beauty. Nature, he argues, makes us morally better, not through commandment or doctrine, but through feeling. This is Wordsworth's secular theology. Beauty cultivates goodness. That serene and the blessed mood in which the burden of the mystery, in which the heavy and the weary weight of all this unintelligible world is lightened. Here the poem ascends to its first philosophical peak, the heavy and the weary weight of all this unintelligible world. Is there a more honest description of the human condition? We are beings in a world we cannot fully understand. We suffer not just from specific pains, but from the sheer weight of not knowing, the mystery of consciousness, the fact of death, the silence of the universe. And Wordsworth says, there are moments, blessed, inexplicable moments, when that weight is lifted, when we become briefly a living soul rather than a burdened mind. While with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. We see into the life of things. What does it mean to see into something rather than merely at it? It means perception becomes participation. The boundary between observer and observed dissolves. This is what mystics call union, what Keats would later call negative capability, what modern psychology calls flow. Wordsworth reached it through nature, and he is saying, this is not rare, this is available, you have felt it too. And then let's move on and let me read you lines 49 to 57. If this be but a vain belief, yet oh, how oft in darkness and amid the many shapes of joyless delight, when the fretful stir, unprofitable, and the fever of the world, having hung upon the beatings of my heart, how oft in spirit have I turned to thee, O sylvan Wye, thou wanderer through the woods, how often has my spirit turned to thee. If this be but a vain belief, yet oh, how oft. Notice the intellectual honesty. He does not claim certainty. If this be but a vain belief, he is not a mystic who has abandoned reason. He is a philosopher who knows that the most important things cannot be proven, only experienced. And he holds both of these truths simultaneously. O sylvan Wye, thou wanderer through the wood, how often has my spirit turned to thee. The river as a confidant, the river as a companion. He has been turning to this river in his mind, the way one turns to a trusted friend in moments of confusion or grief. Wonderful, isn't it? And now let's come to lines 58 to 111. And now with gleams of half-extinguished thought, with many recognitions dim and faint, and somewhat of a sad perplexity, the picture of the mind revives again. While here I stand not only with the sense of present pleasure, but with pleasing thoughts that in this moment there is life and food for future years. And so I dare to hope, though changed no doubt from what I was then first, I came among these hills, when like a roe I bounded over the mountains, by the sides of the deep rivers, and the lonely streams wherever nature led, more like a man flying from something that he dreads, than one who sought the thing he loved. For nature then, the coarser pleasures of my boyish days, and the glad animal movements all gone by, to me was all in all. I cannot paint what then I was. The sounding cataract haunted me like a passion. The tall rock, the mountain, and the deep and gloomy wood, their colours and their forms were then to me an appetite, a feeling and a love that had no need of a remoter charm, by thought supplied, nor any interest unborrowed from the eye. That time is past, and all its aching joys are now no more, and all its dizzy raptures. Not for this faint eye, nor moan, nor murmur, other gifts have followed. For such loss I would believe abundant recompense, for I have learned to look on nature, not as in the hour of thoughtless youth, but hearing oftentimes the still, sad music of humanity, nor harsh nor grating, though of ample power to chasten and subdue. And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns, and the round ocean, and the living air, and the blue sky, and in the mind of man, a motion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of all thought, and rolls through all things. Therefore am I still a lover of the meadows and the woods and mountains, and of all that we behold from this green earth, of all the mighty world of eye and ear, both what they half create and what perceive, well pleased to recognize in nature and the language of the sense, the anchor of my purest thoughts, the nurse, the guide, the guardian of my heart and soul, of all my moral being. This is the heart of the poem, and so I dare to hope, though changed no doubt from what I was when first I came among these hills. The key word, changed. This is where Wordsworth articulates one of the great insights of romantic poetry. The idea that a relationship to the world passes through distinct stages and that each stage has its own gift. Stage 1 is boyhood, which is reflected in lines 67 to 83, when like a roe I bounded over the mountains, more like a man, flying from something that he dreads than one who sought the thing he loved. As a young man, his relationship to nature was animal, physical, instinctive, almost unconscious. He ran through it the way a deer runs. He didn't understand it. He didn't need to. It was appetite. The sounding cataract haunted me like a passion. The tall rock, the mountain, and the deep and gloomy wood, their colors and their forms were then to me an appetite, a feeling, and a love that had no need of a remoter charm by thought supplied. No thought required, pure sensation. This is the romantic innocent, the child who experiences the world directly without the mediation of intellect. Then stage 2 is loss and transition, which is reflected in the lines 83 to 88. That time is past and all its aching joys are now no more, and all its dizzy raptures, not for this faint eye, nor moan nor murmur. He's modeling what mature acceptance looks like, the willingness to let go of one form of being in order to inhabit a deeper one. And then comes stage 3, the philosophical maturity. That's reflected in the lines 88 to 111. I have learned to look on nature not as in the hour of thoughtless youth, but hearing oftentimes the still sad music of humanity. The still sad music of humanity. This is perhaps the most quoted line in the poem, and rightly so. In youth, he heard only nature's music. Now he hears, woven into that music, the sound of human suffering. He has become empathetic. The world's pain has entered him, and this has not diminished his love of nature. It has deepened it. And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns, and the round ocean, and the living air, and the blue sky, and in the mind of man, emotion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of all thought, and rolls through all things. This is the philosophical climax of the poem, and one of the most stunning passages in English literature. Wordsworth is describing something that has no simple name. It is not the Christian God. It is not the Newtonian universe. It is a presence, a motion, and a spirit that he has felt rather than understood. It dwells in setting suns, in the ocean, in the air, and crucially in the mind of man. This is what scholars call Wordsworth's pantheism, the idea that the divine is not separate from the natural world, but is the natural world and is also present in human consciousness. Mind and nature are not opposed. They are expressions of the same underlying spirit. Therefore am I still a lover of the meadows and the woods, and mountains, well pleased to recognize in nature and the language of the sense, the anchor of my purest thoughts, the nurse, the guide, the guardian of my heart and soul, of all my moral being. The anchor, the nurse, the guide, the guardian. These are not decorative metaphors. Wordsworth is saying that nature performs for him the role that religion performs for others. grounding, nourishing, directing, protecting. Now let's move on to last stanza of the poem. That's from lines 111 to 160, where the poem turns toward Dorothy, his sister. Nor perchance, if I were not distraught, should I the more suffer my genial spirits to decay. For thou art with me here upon the banks of this fair river, thou my dearest friend, my dear, dear friend, and in thy voice I catch the language of my former heart, and read my former pleasures in the shooting lights of thy wild eyes. Oh, yet a little while may I behold in thee what I was once, my dear, dear sister, and this prayer I make, knowing that nature never did betray the heart that loved her. It's a privilege through all the years of this our life to lead from joy to joy, for she can so inform the mind that is within us, so impress with quietness and beauty, and so feed with lofty thoughts, that neither evil tongues, rash judgments, nor the sneers of selfish men, nor greetings where no kindness is, nor all the dreary intercourse of daily life shall ever prevail against us or disturb our cheerful faith, that all which we behold is full of blessings. Therefore let the moon shine on thee in thy solitary walk, and let the misty mountain winds be free to blow against thee. And in after years, when these wild ecstasies shall be matured into a sober pleasure, when thy mind shall be a mansion for all lovely forms, thy memory be as a dwelling place for all sweet sounds and harmonies. Oh then, if solitude or fear or pain or grief should be thy portion, with what healing thoughts of tender joy wilt thou remember me and these my exhortations. Nor perchance, if I should be where I no more can hear thy voice, nor catch from thy wild eyes these gleams of past existence, wilt thou then forget that on the banks of this delightful stream we stood together, and that I, so long a worshipper of nature, hither came unwearied in that service, rather say with warmer love, oh, with far deeper zeal of holier love. Nor wilt thou then forget that after many wanderings, many years of absence, these steep woods and lofty cliffs, and this green pastoral landscape were to me more dear, both for themselves and for thy sake. So Dorothy Wordsworth, born in 1771, 1 year after William, was not simply a sister. She was in many ways the hidden co-author of his greatest poetry. They were separated as children after their mother died, sent to different relatives. When they were finally reunited in their 20s, they formed a bond of extraordinary closeness, living together, walking together, observing the world together. Dorothy kept meticulous journals, the Grasmere journals that Wordsworth drew on repeatedly for images, observations, and phrases. Scholars have noted, with some discomfort, the usual intensity of their attachment. We need not speculate beyond what the poetry tells us. What the poetry tells us is this: Dorothy was, for Wordsworth, a living mirror, a way of seeing his former self and of believing in his future one. She was also herself a brilliant observer of nature, a writer of great precision and feeling, a woman who by the conventions of her time could not publish under her own name. Her genius lived in the margins, in her journals, in her brother's poems, in the walks they took together. When William addressed her in the Tintern Abbey, he was not addressing a passive listener. He was speaking to his intellectual equal, his emotional anchor, his most intimate companion. Let's get back to the poem. For thou art with me here upon the banks of this fair river, thou my dearest friend, my dear, dear friend, and in thy voice I catch the language of my former heart, and read my former pleasures in the shooting lights of thy wild eyes. Oh, yet a little while may I behold in thee what I was once, my dear, dear sister. In thy voice I catch the language of my former heart. He's looking at Dorothy and seeing his own past. Her wildness, her shooting eyes, mirrors the boy who once bounded over mountains like a roe. She is still in stage 1, still feeling nature as pure animal joy. And watching her, he can remember what that felt like. He can moan it gently and let it go and love it from a safe distance. This is the function of the people we love who are younger than us or less burdened than us. They carry in their enthusiasm a version of ourselves we have lost. And we grieve for it, and we are grateful for it simultaneously. And this prayer I make, knowing that nature never did betray the heart that loved her. It's her privilege, through all the years of this our life, to lead from joy to joy. Nature never did betray the heart that loved her. This is the poem's greatest declaration of faith. Not religious faith, ecological faith. A faith grounded in experience. That if you remain open to the natural world, if you do not close yourself off in bitterness or cynicism, it will keep giving. It will keep leading you from joy to joy. Then, neither evil tongues, rash judgments, nor the sneers of selfish men, nor greetings where no kindness is, nor all the dreary intercourse of daily life shall ever prevail against us. Dreary intercourse of daily life. He sees you. He sees the exhaustion, the small humiliations, the conversations that leave you feeling less than yourself. He sees all of it. And he says, nature is stronger than all of that. Hold on to it. Let it be your shield. When these wild ecstasies shall be matured into a sober pleasure, when thy mind shall be a mansion for all lovely forms, thy memory be as a dwelling place for all sweet sounds and harmonies. He's describing her future self. He's saying, Dorothy, the wildness you feel now will not disappear. It will transform. It will become a mansion, a dwelling place. Your mind will hold all of this beauty and it will furnish you for the rest of your life. If I should be where I no more can hear thy voice. He's thinking about death, quietly, without drama. If I die before you, and I may, do not forget this moment. Do not forget what this place meant to us. And do not forget that I came here not only for nature, but for thy sake. The poem ends not on the grand pantheistic vision, but on an act of love, a brother's prayer for his sister. Two people standing by a river, knowing that time will eventually separate them, choosing to be present together anyway. So, what Tintern Abbey means to us now. Tintern Abbey was written in a single day, July 13th, 1798. Wordsworth composed it walking. He did not write a single word down until the poem was complete in his mind, and then he transcribed it whole. That is remarkable. It means what sounds like slow philosophical reflection is actually a burst, a torrent of thought and feeling that poured out of him as he walked from Tintern back to Bristol. What does poem ask of us? It asks us to take seriously the idea that the natural world is not background. It is formative. The landscapes of a childhood, the rivers we sat beside, the trees we climbed, they are still inside us. They're doing work. Quiet, slow, essential work. It asks us to accept that we will change, and that change is not loss. The boy who bounded over mountains became the man who heard the still, sad music of humanity. That is not diminishment, that is depth. It asks us to pay attention to the people who carry our former selves, the one whose eyes still shine with a wildness we have had to let go of. To love them not only for themselves, but for what they show us about who we once were. And it asks us, gently, unforgettably, to find something in this world that will not betray us, something that will hold. For Wordsworth, that was the Wye Valley, the steep cliffs, the rolling water. What is it for you? If this moved you or challenged you or made you want to reread the poem, then do. Read it out aloud, read it by a window, or better yet, outside. Wordsworth wrote this poem walking. There is something appropriate about receiving it that way too. If you want to go deeper, I'd recommend reading Dorothy's Grasmere journals. She writes about the same landscape with her own extraordinary voice. And if you want to understand the philosophical architecture of the poem in more detail, Jonathan Bate's Romantic Ecology is extraordinary. Thank you for watching. Leave a comment below. Which lines hit you hardest? I would love to know.